Hi, you're listening to This Is Not Your Practice Life. I'm your host, Macy Renee, and we are going on a journey together, my friends. I'm a certified life and emotional intelligence coach. And if you really want to step into your highest self, there are a few non-negotiables you're going to have to learn, and I am just the person to help you do it. No matter your past, I'm here to help you create a more fulfilling future. So stick around with me. Not only will I teach you how to navigate your brain's daily mind drama, but I'll help you actually understand your mind, your emotions, why you do the things you do, and why others do the things they do. Most importantly, I'll help you build the self-awareness skills to create whatever results you want. It's never too late to change the trajectory of your life. After all, this is not your practice life. Hey, welcome back to another episode of This Is Not Your Practice Life podcast. I'm Macy, and I am so excited that you're joining me today. We've got a juicy topic that we're going to be diving into, and I think you're going to be excited for all of the value that it holds. But before we do that, I do want to take a few minutes to say some quick things. So if you don't want to hear it, you can fast forward, but I really want to share this really quickly. So I am recording several episodes ahead of time because I'm getting ready to go back to my hometown in Kentucky, see my friends and family. I haven't seen them since right before Christmas, so I'm super excited about that. And I wanted to make sure that you all had episodes so that while I'm gone and visiting, you all still get what you need and I'm able to practice presence as much as I can. I will still have work that needs to be done. I will still be doing some coaching calls, but taking as much of my workload off so that I can be present was important to me. So I have some amazing episodes that are coming up for you all. And in addition to that, because I know time flies and it's going to go so quick by the time I get back, we're going to be halfway through March. And I just want to remind you to mark your calendar if you've been on the fence or have been considering signing up for the hybrid experience. This is a brand new program. It has never existed. It is very high level, but I'm super excited about it. And it starts the first week in April. So the last day to sign up for the hybrid experience where you get to have one-on-one coaching with me, group coaching with your peers, and then an in-person retreat in the beautiful, luxurious 30A, Florida, you will need to sign up by March 31st. However, a caveat to that I really want to say, I have been working my ass off. Yes, my ass. I felt the need to emphasize that because I've literally been breaking my brain working on a workbook associated with this program. And oh my gosh, the levels at which you will be using your brain and being coached in this program, it's going to be very, very profound. However, with that being said, I want to mail the people who've already signed up and those of you who are still going to sign up a physical copy of the workbook. So you will get shipped a physical print of it and not have to do that for yourself as long as you sign up by March 20th. Okay? Sign up by March 20th to make sure that you receive a physical print. If you don't want to do that, if you have to wait until March 31st to sign up at the very last minute, because I know there's always those few that run into the door at the last minute, which is fine, but know that you will be responsible for printing the workbook yourself. So if you're wanting a physical copy where I mail it, to you and all the things, just make sure that you sign up by the 20th so that I have plenty of time to figure out where they're going and that you have them by the time the program starts. I am so super excited. If you have any questions, I'm still going to be doing consults even while I'm in Kentucky. So just feel free to go to macyrenee.com and sign up for a free 60-minute consult if you have questions about the hybrid experience or any of the other offers in ways that I can help you, okay? So I'm super excited for that. I literally am chomping at the bits for the hybrid experience. I'm so freaking excited. And I don't know if I'm ever going to offer it again. So if you're on the fence thinking, next time she offers this, I'll do it. I just want to tell you, I don't know if I'm ever going to do it again. It's a very expensive program to run. The price that it currently is literally insane. It's a no-brainer. I know that for you all, your perspective, it may seem like a stretch. And for me, as the business owner, knowing all the expenses that are incurring to make not only the program happen, but the retreat happen, it's literally insane at the price that it's being charged. So I do know that if it ever runs again, it will not be the price that it is now. I can 1000% guarantee that. So if you're on the fence waiting for another run of it, or hoping that it'll be the same price next time, I can assure you with love that it will not be. Okay, so this is really the time period to jump in and trust yourself if you have felt that hell yes in your body at any point in seeing, the hybrid experience marketed. So I'm excited about that. Make sure you write those dates on your calendar. And let's get to today's topic. I'm so excited. So this is a big one that I think is so important to talk about. And I know I say that with a lot of my topics, but this came to me the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk about what this is like as the person doing it and as the person being the receiver of it. And so that is why this podcast episode title is When People Don't Heal Their Trauma, They Spill Their Trauma. And it's exactly like as plain as day, as plain as I said that sentence, that's exactly what happens. When people don't heal their trauma, they spill their trauma. So I have been the doer of this unintentionally, of course, and I've also been the receiver of this. And I'm sure that as the receiver, the people that have done this to me were not intentionally setting out maliciously to do this. And that's why I think that this episode is so valuable to talk about. And if at any point it resonates with you or someone that you know in your life that needs this, share it with them, okay? So here's the thing about traumatic events. Like trauma in itself is this very subjective experience because you could have a row of 20 people lined up who experience the exact same event. And you might have 10 that have it doesn't impact them negatively at all. It's fine. It was just an event that happened and they don't have any kind of negative association with it. But you can look at those other 10 that could tell you they are deeply traumatized from that event in their life. So trauma is very much unique to the individual and how our brain neurologically perceives it as it's occurring. If it puts us in a fight or flight, stressful, full of cortisol kind of release situation, for most of us, we will have trauma associated with it. And then anxiety oftentimes will follow that trauma because our brain recalls it and then tries to anticipate what we would do if it were to happen again. And that anticipation shows up as intense, sometimes what feels like very suffocating, controlling anxiety. But I say that trauma is subjective because, again, we cannot judge what one person perceives as traumatic from another person, okay? It's kind of like, for some reason, our brain perceived it that way, and now it's a stored memory in our body. So there could be outsiders that think, well, that trauma makes no sense. It shouldn't even be a big deal. But for the person who experienced it based on how their brain interpreted that information and how their body reacted and responded and the emotions that they felt in that process, for them, it could be a completely different experience, whether we agree with it or not. Okay, so that's the first thing that's important to recognize, because I think that's a key piece in having empathy for other people's experiences, right? Like I have been around people in my life that are having a panic attack, and I might not understand exactly why that certain thing caused them to have a panic attack, but it doesn't make me like, I don't harp on them like, why are you having a panic attack over that? That makes no sense, right? So the empathy piece of our emotional intelligence, really strengthening that and leaning into that, is being able to recognize that everybody perceives life through such a different lens. And while the way that they perceive things may not make sense to you, for whatever reason, that has been the programming that has occurred in their body. And we don't always have to agree with it, but we need to recognize it. And I think it's really important to practice empathy for it. You can still disagree and be empathetic. Okay. And so, what happens a lot of times in the realm of trauma is that an event has happened, someone is traumatized by it, and then again, they live their life either imitating the very things that cause them the trauma, not because they like it, but because it feels comfortable, or because they haven't had the tools or even the awareness of the tools available to them to heal the trauma. So I can go back to many family occurrences that have happened, starting with my great grandparents, who I was really close with. And I can recall stories that they shared where they experienced trauma. And from that trauma, they, made decisions of how they were going to move forward with their life. And the way that they moved forward with their life once they had kids was they raised their kids either in similar ways as their own trauma or in completely different ways. So to give you an example of this, my great grandparents, I can't remember which one it was, if it was my Oma or my Opa. I remember them talking about how they were never able to speak up and speak out. Like if they didn't agree with something and they wanted to tell their parent, I don't agree, or I have a different opinion, they were scolded, they were hit, they were beat, they were slapped across the face. And while that could be very traumatic as a child, whenever they grew up, that is how they then raised their children, right? So I can remember my grandma talking about a time, and just the way that she recalls this, I can tell that it's traumatic. And when I tell you about it, you'll probably believe also it's traumatic, right? But I can remember her saying she was sitting at the dinner table with my Oma and Opa. She was just a little kid. And here's the crazy thing too. Like, I see my Oma and Opa as like pure gold. They were my great grandparents. And I think a lot of people know that, the experiences sometimes that you have with your mother or your father are so different than when you have children and you see them as grandparents. Like, it's just a different perspective, and that in itself can sometimes be very healing when you see how different they are with a grandchild or great-grandchild than they were with you. And so that's kind of the experience I had with my great-grandparents. Like, they could do no wrong in my eyes. I loved everything about them. I was super close with them. I practically lived with them for the first 10 years of my life. And they were just my people. But again, I can have empathy for my grandma, who I call Ma, her experience, being a child of theirs. And so she recalls this story where she was sitting at the dinner table, and she vividly remembers they were having like mashed potatoes and a few other things. And my grandma, she just is the person that speaks out. Like, her personality is very much like, if she thinks it, it's coming out, whether it's right or wrong, right? And so sometimes it gets her into trouble. Sometimes it's a really good thing. I swear, if it's a thought in her brain, it's going to come out of her mouth. And it was no different for her as a kid. And so she had something that she wanted to say, and apparently I think it was my Oma, my sweet, darling Oma, told her to be quiet, and she wasn't quiet, and she kept talking back, and my Oma again told her to be quiet, and I guess my ma decided she wasn't going to do that. She wasn't going to be quiet. And so my Oma knocked her, slapped her in the face, really knocking her nose so hard that her nose started bleeding, and it was bleeding into the mashed potatoes. And she was crying, of course. And my Oma was at her wit's end, and she said all of a sudden she just screamed, "And you better eat it too." And she said at that point, then my Opa, my great grandpa, stepped in. He was like, "Absolutely not." Now, normally, he was U.S. Army, and he was the strict one, and he was the disciplinarian. Did I say that right? Disciplinarian? I don't know. Maybe I made that word up, or maybe it's right. My brain is like, is that even right? But he was the person that disciplined their households. And so, I think in that moment, my ma thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to eat these bloody mashed potatoes because he's the, authority in this house. But even he was like, no, that's absolutely cruel. You can't have her do that. But I remember when she shared that story, like it was traumatic for me to hear, especially because I hold my Oma and Opa at such a high regard, right? Like I have never seen that side of them ever in my life. And I can't imagine as their great grandchild that they would have ever treated me the way that they treated their kids, right? At certain points in their life. But for my grandma, my ma, after that experience, for like the way that she perceived that was that when she grew up, she was never going to bite her tongue. She was never going to allow anybody to shush her or her opinions, no matter what kind of repercussions there were, because in that moment, she just felt so silenced and punished for her opinions and for being herself. And so I can remember her saying, like, her takeaway from that traumatic event was, I'm never going to be silent. Like, I'm going to always speak up for myself. And the, secondary part of that is also that she demanded respect. So as she was raising my mother, funny enough, a lot of times my mom felt like she couldn't speak up or speak out or say what she wanted to say without being reprimanded, right? And sometimes the way that my grandma reprimanded my mom was also to slap her or I guess whoop her, whatever. And so then for myself and my sisters as kids, that was also the first thing of discipline if there was ever a time we needed it. Now, I will admit I didn't get a lot of spankings as a kid because for me, I was so anxiety ridden from all the traumas that I endured that I became the good girl and the people pleaser and the I will not rock the boat kind of person. I became the person that I won't speak up because it's not safe. Speaking up and speaking out is seen as disrespectful and has repercussions like being whooped or spanked or grounded or, and it's not that I am against discipline, right? Like whenever I have children, I know that there have to be consequences to certain actions, but I think what I have seen in, the different generations within my family is there hasn't always been teaching of why. It's more so been, I can't control my anger as an adult, so I am going to lay hands on you, right? I can't control my emotions as an adult, my frustration, being at the end of my rope, being overtired, being overstressed. And so you're going to catch these hands, right? Or you're going to pay the price for the anger that I cannot control. And in whatever types of traumas my family members have experienced, the unhealed pieces have spilled over into, the upbringing that I have had. And I don't, again, think that it's an intentional thing that we do. But when we have things that are unhealed, we often carry them with us if we don't have the awareness to heal it. So I will tell you, like, in the beginning of even my relationship, and I think that I have talked about this in previous episodes or at some point in previous episodes, there was someone in my life that was very verbally abusive. And every single time this person opened up their mouth, I mean, I could feel my insides shaking as a kid. Like I just could not handle screaming and yelling. I couldn't handle negative tone. I could, like, just all of that was associated in my brain as bad things are happening, because that's what I would witness, right? Every single time this person would do this or have this behavior, it was always this very dramatic, frantic, fearful kind of event. And so the way that my brain associates yelling and strong tones and sarcasm, it perceives it as this manipulation tactic for control, right? And it's not good. So anytime anybody would yell as a kid, teachers, my, grandparents, even my oma and opa, if they just raised their voice at each other, like, I would have an internal visceral response where I would just start shaking and freaking out, and my whole body would tell me, like, I'm unsafe, I'm unsafe, I'm unsafe. And here's the important thing about that is, yes, I cannot help or control that is what was kind of programmed in me as a kid before my brain was fully developed. That is the program that I grew up with. However, when you become an adult, you have to start observing your patterns, your behaviors, the way you respond to things, the way that you handle life, and that's what emotional intelligence is. And when it is lacking, you will just repeat patterns, or you will sabotage various relationships with your perception from the place of trauma. Meaning that whenever I got into my relationship with my now husband, anytime we got into an argument, and sometimes it still happens, if there's a certain tone used, my whole body shuts down, my entire body. I just completely shut down. I don't want to speak anymore. My body goes into fight or flight, and I don't like it. Whether the argument is over something so stupid and silly, or it's one of our, bigger, more serious conversations, it really doesn't matter. My whole body reverts back into that childhood response, that childlike response, I should say. And this is not just me. This is anybody going through trauma, right? Like, our body will oftentimes respond without us, without awareness. That's why self-awareness is such a huge piece of the work that you're doing in coaching, okay? And such a big reason for this podcast is to instill you guys with so much self-awareness that you can really start making changes before you ever even start coaching with me. And then coaching will just take you 10,000 steps further, right? But that's the deal. Like, you have to become aware of why you're responding the way that you're responding. So when we first started dating, my immediate response before I had ever worked on healing or coaching or personal development was to scream back, cry, and then just completely shut down and then punish, okay? And punish by, I'm not going to talk to you. I am not going to, I'm just not going to associate. And this wasn't even just with my, boyfriend or anything like this. It was also family members. Like, it could be friends. It was like, no, my whole body would shut down. Now, I realized as an adult, it's not a productive way to handle intense conversations, even conversations that are not getting intense. Like, I can't perceive someone's tone every single time as associated with the person who is verbally abusive, because not every single person trying to have a conversation with me in my life is verbally abusive, right? But my brain would tell me that. And that is why I'm saying when people don't heal their trauma, they spill their trauma, because what I would do is I would start sabotaging relationships with my mind telling me this person is very verbally abusive. I don't like their tone. I don't like the way that they're yelling or communicating with me. I need to flee the scene. Okay, but the result of that is that conversations were never had. Communication was never adequately talked through. Like, problems were never solved, because it was just easier for me to shut down and then build resentment and anger and all of the things. And if we don't heal that, we take that into each relationship in our life. Okay. And so I can see where, in my upbringing, the people that helped raise me, there were certain traumas they never healed that then impacted my life experiences. And it would be very easy for me to have children and then justify every single way that I'm parenting them as, well, this is what my family did and I turned out fine. Well, I always love, this makes me giggle, but it shouldn't, but it does. I always love whenever people are like, well, I got whoopings and I was spanked and beat with a stick or a belt or whatever, and I turned out fine. But they're like freaking out and having anxiety and panic attacks and stress and constant cortisol release and can't manage their emotions and can't communicate. And they're like, I turned out fine. And I always want to say, like, did you though? Like, because I used to say the same thing. Like, yeah, I got whoopings when necessary, and I got, yelled at or this and that or whatever the repercussions were, or whatever the traumatic event was. I would always justify it as like, well, I turned out fine. It made me stronger. And then I'm like, but are you? Because you also went through 17 years of therapy and you've spent like way over probably like at least $30,000+, if not closer to 50 or more, in coaching to make sure that you are able to function as a human being. So we have to be careful even whenever I think even the way in which we're responding to our children when we're losing our cool, when we're stressed to the max, when again, we're overly tired or just really struggling, like we have to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves and other people, because we might be like, yeah, well, I turned out fine, but are you? Are you okay? Like deeply, do you feel healthy? Do you feel mentally and emotionally sound? Or do you feel like you could use a little bit of help from the things that you also endured? So it's just kind of to bring awareness to, in that it would be really easy for me to have kids and, immediately go into screaming, immediately go into yelling, immediately go into, well, the reason that I'm like this is because when I was 7, blah, 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 blah. Or the reason that I respond this way is because so-and-so in my life was verbally and emotionally abusive. And that is why I am now parenting you this way, because I have trauma. Like it's just, we have to be willing to look at when things are not clean. And clean being like, we haven't cleaned it up. So sometimes I've been in arguments with people and I have checked them on their tone, because now I know to set boundaries, right? I know to have boundaries of how I'm going to allow people to talk to me and not talk to me. And, if I call it out or let them know, like, there's a boundary here, I'm going to walk away from this conversation if you continue to speak like that or behave this way. A lot of times the defense is like, well, I've had a lot of trauma in my life and that's why I'm responding this way. And again, I can have empathy for that person and their trauma, but that doesn't mean that I have to actually put up with it. So sometimes we're the person doing more damage because we're not cleaning up and healing our trauma. And sometimes we're the receiver of it because other people are not cleaning up their trauma. And it is never our responsibility to help other people heal their trauma. That is their job. They have to be the ringleader in that, right? They have to be the driver of wanting to clean that up for themselves. Just like I have to be the person willing to clean that up in order to have the healthiest of relationships, in order to work through things, in order to not see everything as catastrophic and then blame it on my upbringing as a child and my trauma. I have to be willing as an adult to step up to the plate and do the very hard healing work that doesn't feel good, rather than the blaming of other people, other things, other circumstances, and external things I can't always control. Okay? And so I just want to encourage you to look at, one, where are you spilling your trauma onto other people? Right? I see it a lot of times in relationships where, like, maybe you were cheated on in the past and you get into a new relationship and this new relationship seems to be going well, but you are subconsciously or consciously sabotaging it, questioning them, not trusting them, like they've never given you a reason not to, but you're using the past of being cheated on as a reason to validate yourself for why you're treating this new human being that way. That's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Or maybe you were lied to in the past in a relationship, and then you start to hound this new person who's never given you any reason to believe that they're lying, right? But you're like, well, I'm just asking because I've been lied to in the past. And everything about your current relationship is based on the person in the past who created that traumatic response. We're not invalidating the fact that you can have trauma from that or have a lot of residual things from that. But that doesn't give you permission to spill it on the next person who has not done anything to have harmed you or to also cause that response. And so that's what I'm talking about when I say it's so important for you to clean that up and not bring your past into the future, validating that the way that you're behaving in the future or the present is because of the past. Does that make sense? Like you just don't, like, it's not a productive way to be because it will keep you in vicious, toxic cycles. Only you will be the person that's creating and driving the toxic cycle because of what you're not healing. Okay, so if I took my upbringing as a child and then I go to raise children and I'm like, well, I'm this way because my parents or grandparents or great-grandparents, like they did this. That's why I am treating my child like this, screaming at them, right? Or doing things that are very traumatic or, it's not productive. I don't want to raise my kids that way. And so my effort is in what do I have to do now to heal, to make sure I don't spill it on my kids to where they're in 17 years of therapy cleaning up a mess that I can actually work on now so that they don't even have a mess, so that their experience is very much different. Like I lived a lot of my childhood and even young adulthood feeling like the things that my family members didn't heal was just dumped onto me, right? Like I felt very much like, oh, well, they're really struggling in their life. It's my responsibility to try and help them or heal them or be the good girl or the people pleaser and walk on eggshells so that I don't upset them because they can't control themselves when they're mad. They can't control their emotions when they're angry. So I will repress who I am so that I have safety. This is what we sometimes do, right? Like your dad is maybe an alcoholic or drinking all the time, and you've learned to be a good girl or good boy because if you don't, when dad starts drinking or even mom starts drinking and over drinking, you don't want to get hit. You don't want to be screamed at. You don't want your mother or father to be attacked by the person drinking all the alcohol. So you repress who you actually are in the name of safety. And it's very, very traumatic. And there's one of two ways that this plays out as an adult with the unhealed trauma is you either grow up as the adult who also picks up drinking as a coping mechanism, not because you enjoyed your traumatic childhood, but because it's familiar and the only way that you can recognize to cope, just like your mother or father. Or two, you grow up so resentful of the childhood that you had that you try to do everything opposite of what they're doing, but you don't really know who you are down to your core because you're running from something that you really didn't like. So if in both scenarios it's unhealed, you either become the parent who's over drinking in front of your children and repeating patterns, or you become the parent who is so left field, right? Where you're maybe overbearing and overprotective and overcautious, right? Because you don't want your kids to go through the same thing, but the fanaticness of trying not to be your parent ends up traumatizing your children in a whole different way. And so what I'm saying is anything, again, what you don't heal, you spill onto other people. So whether you came out as the person who doesn't drink alcohol, right? or you come out as the person who does, it's still your responsibility to heal it. It's not fair that that's your upbringing. It's not fair that that's what you've endured. It's not fair. Life is not fair in that way, right? But the reason that you even endured it was because your family members didn't heal it. They spilled it, okay? And now you are in the position where you're either going to do the exact same thing or you are going to take responsibility and learn how to heal it. And you do that in therapy, you do that in counseling, you do that in coaching, right? Coaching is a little bit more progressive. So I would say, like, if you, how to know one way or the other what you may need, if you have never processed your emotions, if you have just never really talked about your challenges and your mental health and your emotional health with anybody, I think therapy is a perfect place to start, because unloading all of that in itself is so therapeutic. It is so therapeutic to just word vomit all over that therapist, counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, right? Like, just, it's very therapeutic. I did it for 17 years. And then I hit a point where I'm like, okay, I know how to regurgitate it very, very well. I'm so good every single week at regurgitating. It's like a talent. I don't know what to do after I've regurgitated my life experiences 158,000 times. Like, what do I do now? Because I'm still mad. I still don't have a good relationship with the people who I feel caused all of this. I don't know where to go from here. I'm tired of it controlling my life. I'm tired of feeling suppressed. I'm tired of feeling like I don't know who I am anymore. I don't want to continue these patterns. I want to move on from the patterns. Help me. And I'm willing, the most important part, I am willing to go through absolute hell and back to make sure that even if it's hard, I am not this person repeating these patterns. Like, I'm ready to do the work. That is the point where you're ready for coaching. When you're so sick of your own excuses, when you're so sick of, rolling around in the misery, and you really truly want to take the action and learn and expand your brain to change, that's when you're ready for coaching. If you want to continue to justify your traumas and your experiences and kind of wallow in some self-pity and feeling bad for yourself and life not being fair, and you just have a lot of emotions underneath there to process, therapy is going to be, again, the best place, because coaching is going to be more tough. Like, okay, yes, that is your past, but what are we going to do about it to make sure that the result you get is different? And when you're there, you're ready for coaching, you're ready for a consult, you're ready for more than likely the next step. And so I can support you at whatever level you're at, as long as it is a mentality of, I want to move forward. So there are some different ways to help you through that. So the best way, if any of this in this podcast resonates with you, is to schedule a consult. We will talk about where you're at in your life, in, across different categories, different spectrums of things. And we will discuss, based on where you're at, what option is going to be the best. I will tell you that the hybrid experience is going to be more so advanced. So I will say it's going to be better if you've already had maybe some therapy, or you have had coaching, or if at the very least you've been binging this podcast, or you've been a former client or you're a current client. Like, for the hybrid experience, that's going to be the best fit, where you've already built a pretty strong foundation, because we're going to take the foundation and we're going to amplify it and go into more advanced principles for really getting you the results that you want in your life. If you don't feel like you're at that place yet, my group program, the Equip Society, will help you lay a very, very strong foundation if you don't feel confident that you have that yet and you're still learning how to kind of heal and process trauma. The Equipped Society Lifetime Access Program is going to be the best thing for you. And then the most high touch level that you can do is one-on-one. The hybrid experience, though, I will tell you, covers all of it: one-on-one, group, and an in-person retreat. But again, there is a certain level that I would like people's brain to be at in preparation for that. And that is someone who feels like, I've been consuming the work for a very long time. I know a lot of the foundational principles. I already feel changed by them. Now I want to take what I have learned and really learn how to put it to the test, really learn how to implement all of the work that I have consumed and learned up to this point. And if you're in that place, you're probably a really good candidate for the hybrid experience. But if you're unsure, schedule a consult as soon as possible. And as a reminder, the hybrid experience closes March 31st, and you cannot get in after the doors have closed. If you want a physical copy of the workbook mailed to you, you'll want to try to get in the doors no later than March 20th so that I have plenty of time to get you your copy before the program begins. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me anytime. All right, I love you guys, and I hope you enjoy the next 2 episodes while I am out of town. I will see you again soon. Bye. Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of This Is Not Your Practice Life podcast. If you'd like to connect on social media, you can find me on both Instagram and Facebook at Macy Renee Coaching. And if you want to stay up to date on all of my offers, announcements, and inspirational emails, you can join my email list at macyrenee.com. In addition, if there's a way that I can further support you in your coaching journey, you can schedule a free 60-minute consult at macyrenee.com anytime you want so we can discuss the best options for you. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope you have an amazing day.